Folks, fasten your seatbelts, because things are about to get weird. We truly live in a world with crazy people. And this story, well, you're not going to believe this one. Now, we all know that there is no such thing as fairies. There are no tiny, half-naked women with nice bodies flying around tending to the forest. We know this. But like I always say, truth is stranger than fiction. If a creature like this did exist on our planet, then I can assure you that it wouldn't be the least bit sexy or nice or sprinkling magic fairy dust everywhere. It would probably try to bite, sting, and stalk your ass. Yes, I'm talking about a fairy from hell. Now, right now, you can go on the internet and find dozens of photos and videos of all types of small, weird-looking creatures. Some of them are hoax, some photoshopped, some pieced together with parts from different animals. And then there's the small percentage that cannot be explained. In other words, the creature is or was a real creature. However, the examiners cannot explain the creature. Now, there's been a discovery of yet another tiny corpse, a dead body, 9 inches tall, humanoid, with wings. What makes this corpse interesting is not that it was x-rayed to reveal a complete skeleton, but that it was allegedly shot down with buckshot. As the story goes, it was found lying along the side of a road in Mexico by a young boy just minutes after it had been shot. Whoever shot it took off, and for good reason. I mean, this thing has a human-like face with sharp teeth and a tail with a stinger. Now, I would have just ruled this thing out as just totally unbelievable. Then I was reminded of a scripture in the Bible. And out of the smoke, locusts came forth upon the earth, and authority was given them, the same authority as the scorpions of the earth have. And they were told to harm no vegetation of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And it was granted to the locusts not to kill them, but that these should be tormented 5 months. And the torment upon them was a torment by a scorpion when it strikes a man. And in those days the men will seek death, but will by no means find it. And they will desire to die, but death keeps fleeing from them. And the likeness of the locusts resembled horses prepared for battle, and upon their heads were what seemed to be crowns like gold, and their faces were as men's faces. But they had hair as women's hair, and their teeth were as those of lions. And they had breastplates like iron breastplates, and the sounds of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running into battle. Also, they have tails and stings like scorpions, and in their tails is their authority to hurt the men 5 months. They have over them a king, the angel of the abyss. In Hebrew, his name is Abaddon, but in Greek, his name, Apollyon. Now, I truly hope John was speaking figuratively. The last thing we need is a bunch of little flying monster killer fairies going around paralyzing people and then slowly eat them alive. That would not be cool. People, get your fly swatters, baseball bats, and frying pans ready. By now, Everyone should know that people find all types of weird creatures. Washed up on shore, in the woods, in caves. They find big skeletons. They find tiny skeletons. They find mothmen, ape men, giant men, fishmen, alien bodies. They have footage of aliens, Bigfoot, Loch Ness monsters, ghosts, vampires, dwarves, leprechauns, goblins. Folks, the point is this. This latest story about this fairy creature would be laughed at, discredited, and disregarded. My question is this: is it possible that there is some truth in these photos and footage mixed in with all of the science fiction and mythology? And should we always just dismiss something like this for being fake? Or should we say, wait a minute, let me take a closer look at this? You can believe whatever you want, folks. I don't care if things like this exist or not. Because at the end of the day, it's probably no more dangerous than the bee that can sting you, the spider that can bite you, the tiger that can eat you, and the man that can shoot you.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Thank you for watching Now You See TV. This is your host, John Pounders, and usually I have my co-host, John Hall, with me tonight, but if you guys would pray for him, he has a horrible migraine, and he can't make it, and I know he really wants to, so for him not to make it because of migraine, it's got to be really, really horrible, so make sure you guys keep him in prayer. Tonight we have the most anticipated show of the millennium, which, no, I don't think it really is, but it could be. You never know. We'll see what happens here because we're talking about some stuff that is really interesting. We're going to be talking about evidence of hybrid animals, giants, dwarves of some sort, maybe possibly fairies, and we're going to be just discussing this archaeological evidence and historical documents that we found through this. And to be, Chad is the first time on our show, so I want to welcome you guys, Gary and Chad. Thank you guys so much for coming on tonight.
Well, it's my intense pleasure.
As you can see, Chad kind of copped out on us. He's got his picture, not his face, so he had a camera problem. So, but anyway, thank you guys for coming on, and so we'll get this started, man. And the reason I had the show is Chad piqued my interest in a few of these subjects, so I'm going to let him kind of start off and talk a little bit about some of these things. And I think the main topic of the night was going to be the fairy graves, supposed fairy graves. I'm not sure if they're actually fairy graves or if they're what they are, but they really seem to be out of this world type, human hybrid type things. Chad, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh man, there's tons of these little different pygmy and hobbits and other things. I know that one of them is the Homo floresiensis, that is basically, we're on an island called Flores, which was right between Australia and Indonesia, and basically the people that lived there, they called them the Ibu-Gogos, and said that these little creatures, they were looked like little humans, but they were hairy. And they said that they were constantly coming into the villages and stealing things. And eventually, one of them came in and stole a baby, and they chased them back to their cave and supposedly killed them off. And for a long time, everybody thought it was just a legend that these were some sort of mythical creature that the villagers were making up, and until eventually some archaeologists actually went into one of the caves and they found the skeletons of some of these little creatures. Do you want to get?
My mic was muted there, but yeah, we'll get into it a little bit more. I know that I've seen something recently, and I don't know the legitimacy of it, but it looked like to me, it looked like a little rabbit type person, but I saw something that looked like an umbilical cord on that. I don't know if you guys saw that or not, but that was interesting. There's a legend behind those kind of creatures. Does anybody, one of you guys, can tell us about that? That'd be interesting. If not, I'll go into it a little bit, but it seems really neat.
I sent you the link on that in the group message on Facebook. Basically, James DeWitt and Comcrash are the two that I've seen that actually brought that to my attention. I think it's called the Patati or something like that, about these little creatures that, again, look humanoid, but they got these elongated like rabbit ears. And there was an article that actually came out, which is the one I sent you, where back in 2012, and I believe it was Nambia, something like that. Anyways, it was an African community where a hunting party was actually out with a film crew, and they encountered these things, and they said that they shot at one of them. They chased it, and it actually ran back to a area where there was several of them. And he said that whenever they went in and encountered them, the one that they were chasing actually ran up and tried to attack them, and they ended up shooting and killing it. And that's the photo of them holding it up.
Yeah, I saw it. It looked like it had ears, but it also looked like it had an umbilical cord. And I'm thinking, to me, well, I showed it to my wife, and she's skeptical, like, of everything. She's like my Scully to my, the Mulder X-Files thing. She's everything she sees, she kind of discounts. But she said it looked like a deformed baby they were holding with an umbilical cord in it. And I was like, well, I guess that's a very possible explanation, but I think that there's been more research done into it other than just kind of writing it off that easy. But there's so many different things. I was looking at all these different proofs and stories. There's stories that originate here in the United States. And Gary, tell us a little bit about what you've encountered in the last 30 years of your research about some of these things.
Well, I think the first thing what I found very, very surprising is that the idea of little people is not sort of just in fairy tales, that it is in all cultures, all continents around the world except for Antarctica. And although there's not that many that's known in Asia, but you take the ones that are in Indonesia that Chad was talking about, and those are the same types of beings that are talked about all through Southeast Asia and into Asia. So I think when we look at the fairy mythology and some of the archaeology on the fairies, we need to understand that this is another one of those common sort of worldwide human legacies where everybody in every continent has this mythology. And I think they're one of the reasons why it is difficult for people to accept. And there's so many different looks to the fairies, and there's not just one kind of them. I mean, some of them are 2 feet, some of them are 3 feet, some of them are 4 feet, some of them are really, really small. And we see all of these different kinds being represented in a lot of the different fairy tales and a lot of different literature, so that we see, hairy ones, we see spindly ones, we see really ugly ones with big noses, and these are all representations of the variety of all of the different types of fairy tales. Or not of fairy tales, but of the little people. And when we talk about what Chad was talking about, the North American account, I mean, people don't understand, or maybe they don't realize, because it's not well published, that the native North American Aboriginal history, and they would look at it as history, not mythology, just as the Greeks would look at it that way, is absolutely loaded with talk of the little people. And not only, there's three sort of common things. I mean, there's a lot of different commonalities between the tribes of North America, but it's in almost every tribe you have the giants, and you have the little people, and you have Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And they all seem to be sort of connected and related. And that's some of the surprising things that, kind of struck me as I dug into the fairy mythology. And, also the fact that there has been many, many archaeological discoveries of little people, particularly in North America. And just as with the giant graveyards, or where they find giant skeletons, and again, I think this is another commonality to this whole sort of mystery, is that the scientists and the archaeologists who dig them up, they send them and they pass them on to the Smithsonian again. And amazingly, they absolutely disagree. And of course, the first question is somebody say, well, give me an example. So, there's Lawrence Lundorf and Nancy Menderes who are on record for saying that and they are archaeologists, that these discoveries have gone to the Smithsonian and they've disappeared. And of course, this is the same thing that happens with the giant skeletons.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I pulled up this article about the Namibian report about this creature, and this isn't the best picture I've seen of it, but definitely interesting. That right there kind of leads me to believe that it's more than just a deformed baby right there. But then again, Photoshop is a wondrous thing nowadays. Yeah. But I'm looking at this. You're talking about the bodies found in the Rocky Mountain area, the Shoshone tribes, and I found some of these things. This mummified little person that they found in the 1950s. There's just interesting stuff. I know Chief Riverwind, I'm supposed to bring an artifact to him when they're in Indianapolis not too long from now. Like, there's some people that found some stuff here, and then there's other stuff that's been found in the Evansville area too that we're going to be doing a show about. I'll show it to you, Gary, when you get into town in Evansville for the conference. But it's pretty neat, the kind of stuff that you'll find that and see, one of the guys that found it, he found a whole bunch of things that were pre-Indian to our area, and so there it kind of disproves a lot of the history. The history that supposedly makes up Evansville, Indiana, the Indian history. This is predates, and we have angel mounds, what they call angel mounds here, which the serpent mounds are not too far from here, but they kind of resemble that. There hasn't been a whole lot of excavations done on them, but they call them the angel mounds, which is interesting. But I'm looking at, like, when I look at a lot of this stuff, and I see old reports of when we were first founded, of these giants that are in caves with the ginger, with the reddish hair. I see reports of these creatures that were roughly 15 to 20 feet tall. And is that something that you in your guys' research? I mean, what have you guys come across for that? Because I'm been looking at a lot of it, and I'd like to see if your research lines up with mine.
I've seen lots of things, in excess of 20 feet. I've seen stuff as tall as 22, 23 feet. But I've recently sent Gary a couple of newspaper clippings where there was 18-foot giants they found actually here in Austin, Texas. So I mean, the whole even up there where you live in Indiana, there's 200 pyramids up there in Indiana alone that most people don't even know about.
Yeah, from all across California to the Midwest to Texas, and yes, Chad has sent me some, and I've added those to other newspaper articles. And there's also a group about old newspaper articles where they're logging newspaper accounts of the giants that were discovered in the early 1900s and 1800s. And again, all of them say that they basically went over to the Smithsonian and then they just absolutely disappear. But some of them have pictures in there, which is really kind of cool. So I think I'd like to have a collection, more of a collection, and start adding to it, like what I've been doing on the newspaper articles of the dwarves and the little people, and whether they're hobbit size or whether or not they're dwarf size or elf size. I mean, there's just so much that's out there that I think has just been sort of swept under the carpet because they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, and long before the Smithsonian was snatching them up, there was the Vatican was snatching them up because a lot of the
Absolutely.
work that Steve Quill and Timothy Alberino have been doing, that's where every time that they encounter stuff beyond a certain year period, it's the Vatican. But when the Smithsonian came on board and they started taking care of all that.
There's a couple little spots that a lot of people don't know about that I've talked to an archaeologist friend of mine. His name's Aaron Judkins, and we're going to try to make it to these spots. It's a reservation where they still have some of these bones and stuff on display, but actually they're not actually on display. They're in the back, but they still have these bones, and we're going to go try to get them on film and see them before they get snatched up, because they did have some on display that got taken. They had some in the local museum that got taken, but they actually still have some. And we're keeping the location secret until we can go film it. But it's really interesting to see that they actually, took hold of some of these things without giving them up, and hopefully we can get to them before anybody else does. That would be so cool to have those on
Yeah,
film.
I've even heard of accounts of the Smithsonian actually buying up institutions that had bones of giants that wouldn't turn them over to them.
Yeah, they've taken over holy places that are holy to the Indians anyway, to take over a lot of these things. If you watch, I did a show called Forbidden Archaeology with Aaron Judkins, and he talks about a lot of the stuff he's seen as an archaeologist that within a matter of a month somebody's there to take it away, and they've taken it to the Smithsonian. Supposedly they still have them there at the Smithsonian, but not for public viewing. And I think, when I look at the reasoning behind it, and I'd like to hear your guys' take on it, I'm thinking that it disproves their evolutionary theory, disproves a lot of things that they have going on. So they want to keep that a secret, as well as it proves that there's a spiritual aspect to a lot of what's going on.
Oh yeah, they hide anything that points back to the Messiah. Have you guys seen Giants on Record, the book that Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman did, where they took all these thousands of articles from newspapers and put it all in one big gigantic book?
Yeah, I haven't seen that book. That'd be a great book to have, but I've heard about that. That's a great sort of record that hopefully doesn't just kind of disappear and all the copies disappear, because that's supposed to be just awesome.
Oh yeah, and just about every single article in there at the very end, it says that the bones were sent off to the Smithsonian. Every single one.
So if you look at, just to get back to your point on this, John, is the reason why both the Vatican and the Gnostics and the polytheists have separate reasons why they don't want much attention put on this. So when you look at what the Gnostics are trying to do is they're the ones who introduced the evolutionary theory, and it's sort of the first layer or the superficial aspect of evolving into gods, but they're talking about a spiritual evolution in terms of the soul. But they created evolution not as to hang their hat on. They did that to turn people away from Christianity. That's the only purpose that it serves. So the reason why they don't want the true history, which they truly believe in terms of their connection back to the giants, and obviously a connection to the fairies and so much more that we've talked about on so many other shows, is that they want to keep the focus on destroying the only thing that's really preventing them from creating the New World Order and world government in the end time, and that's the stubborn Christians. They have to destroy Christianity. So don't get caught into the idea that they're trying to defend evolution. They're trying to keep it there to destroy Christianity and to deceive people. So, there's a different motivation there. And of course, the Vatican, they've got a lot of mixed sort of things going on in the Catholic Church. But certainly, they have seemingly no interest in wanting to look at prehistory whatsoever. So they tend to hide and keep secret all of that. And if you've ever attended a Catholic church on a regular basis, they will never talk about Genesis 6 in terms of the giants or what happened really before the flood, other in a very, very superficial manner.
Yeah, and it seems to be the case with a lot of I guess churches anyway, Baptist churches, you name it. It's in seminary, they pretty much shy away from any kind of information like that, and it's really sad. I went to a Bible college, and that was one of the first things they tried to make it people believe that the Sethite theory was the thing that they taught there, and that was it doesn't hold water at all to the scripture. I mean, I've tested it. In fact, I got those are some of the questions that if you go to church and talk about, that you'll actually get in trouble for talking about it. Or they'll tell you to quit questioning the Word of God and stuff when you're just trying to ask questions. That's one of the reasons that I turned from Christianity as a young, before I came back to it. That's one of the reasons I turned, because the questions I would ask, they just didn't have an answer for, or they just didn't care one way or another. So, but this picture right here, wow, this thing is interesting looking. I don't know if you guys can see the screen share that I got going on. I'm trying not to share anything too crazy, but that right there is, I wonder if that's been DNA tested. It's supposedly in Wyoming, U.S., so I don't know. I wonder about that. Do you guys know if that's been DNA tested?
I know that they've done an X-ray of it, and it actually has an internal skeleton stuff.
Right. Yeah, I believe it's probably human, or humanoid type creature. I just wonder if, something like that, man. I mean, somebody needs to get that DNA tested. That's just interesting.
It is, and I think if there's more attention focused on this, I think it'll gain momentum, just like the concept of North American giants has just sort of snowballed in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, you would never really hear of it in a large way, a decade ago. So I think shining some attention on it and bringing out, the connections to what might be between the giants and secret societies and prehistory and aliens and all those other sort of connections, because I find the more you dig in, you just see more and more connections. John, you and I did a show on Peter Pan the other day, and I had alluded to a fact that, one of the little boys, which, is representative of different types of, little people, I think, in Peter Pan, would be the North American little people. And, the Cherokee legend, and we didn't talk about this, kind of sorry I didn't, because it would have been a perfect show for it, but they have a legend about a boy who wanted to live forever, right? And he wanted to stay young forever, and he didn't want to grow up. And so he was caught in this tussle between his parents and, wanting to do what he wanted to do. And the little people took him to a place where he could be young forever. And
wow.
This is a very, very similar story to the Peter Pan story. So, I'm thinking, and they called him Forever Boy, is what I call it, loosely translated. So I think, there's these sort of undeniable connections between these mythologies, and the question is what does it all mean, and where do they fit?
Yeah, no doubt. We'll have to go on a trek, Gary, and just go check out some of these spots and do a little documentary about it, because I mean, I'm interested in it, and I think people are covering it, like they're talking about it, but even in Watchers, they went to some of these places, but I think if some of these places have been untouched and haven't been nobody's been to them to talk about them and see them, because I really want to go to these places and get it on video so people can know it's not just an article. They can actually see this stuff for themselves, because and I want to know for myself. I could be, what if it is just an article? I want to go there and see it. So hopefully we'll when next time we get together, maybe at some point we'll be able to. I think you're going to be in Nashville at some point during the thing. I don't know how far away in Tennessee that some of these grave sites are, but it might be worth the drive to go check it out. So
be cool, wouldn't it? So
yeah.
One of the other connections that I came across was that I talk in a lot of the other shows that there's many different classifications of fairies. There's 4 major ones, but in the little people there's 3 classifications, and just as there are in the mainstream sort of European fairies, and just for people who don't know what those ones are, those are the gnomes, and those are the ugly ones. Then you have the leprechauns, which are mischievous, and then you have the little people, which are generally sort of the good-looking ones, right? Well, the same is said in the native Indian ones, and the Cherokees have the name for them. There's one that I'll use as the example, and so they call them, the dogwood people, the rock people, and the laurel people. And again, the Laurel people are the ones that are mischievous and play tricks on them. And so when I look at how they describe those little people in the native legends, I see, the same type of species, if you want to look at it that way, as is described in the European ones. And just like when you go into the Menehune and the Polynesian Islands and the Hawaiian Islands, they have, some unique characteristics, just as the ones in Indonesia does. But I mean, what we're seeing is like three major sort of groups, and then within those groups, you've got many sort of subgroups and slight variations. So like the gnomes are kind of the ugly ones. And in mythology, the gnomes, where their connection comes into sort of mysticism and the ancient knowledge and the technology, the giants and the kingships, and just as you would see them in any sort of wizardry sort of show that is showing an Atlantean type of mythology, with wizards with long hair, they've always got these little people, elves and dwarves and whatever, but the gnomes are the ones who kept and guarded the knowledge. And these are the ugly ones. And out of the gnomes would be the ones where the gray aliens also come from. So I think we have this sort of commonality and connection. And also when we look at little people and you really dig back and you learn that it's not everywhere, but you get these odd things that come up, that they have these almost reprobate spirits, similar to that of the Nephilim. And what I mean by that is their spirits are not allowed into heaven, just as the original Nephilim weren't. So one then sort of, and I've not seen anything that says that the fallen angels did the DNA manipulation to create these or did some sort of sexual copulation to create them. But all of a sudden when we talk about that connection where the first generation of Nephilim, their spirits aren't allowed into heaven, and the same sort of talk is about the little people, then you kind of say, well, maybe their history is the same. And then when we talk about the technology and the knowledge and the gnomes guarding that, and we understand that the little grays are identical looking to the gray aliens, flying machines and having great technology and going through portals. And then when we find out that connected with the little people, there's these domens, these fairy domens, which translates as fairy portals, which perhaps, spaceships come through if you want to go down that mythos, or just from one dimension to another. But within that sort of metaphorical allegory, mythos narrative, you see this consistent pattern, and these fairy domens are all over the world, just as the little people are all over the world, and just as they are in most mythologies when you're talking about prehistory and kingships and giants in the ruling class.
And they talk about them in Ireland, Greece, Philippines, Hawaiian Islands, Indonesia, pretty much everywhere, and they go by different names in some places. Of course, you got fairies, brownies, gnomes, pixies, leprechauns, pygmies. I mean, I'm not, obviously pygmies, they're in Greek mythology, but there's also a pygmy race in Africa right now, supposedly. Yep. But, this is just interesting the way it travels around the world. Now, Troy had a question in the chat room I'm going to ask you real quick, and I obviously have an opinion on it too, but I'm pretty sure it lines up exactly what yours is, so I'll go ahead and let you answer it. And it says, so did Tolkien follow the names of the little people from mythology accurately, or did he muddy the waters with his own fiction on top of what historically attributed to various races?
Yes, he's added to it, in my opinion, if that question is directed to me, John.
Yeah, it's directed to you, yep.
Yeah, and now he used the Norse mythology on elves as opposed to the Celtic or Central European or others, so he has a distinctive Aryan, Nordic flavor to it into prehistory. But yeah, he's done some changes, and he's also mixed in the ancient Sumerian aspect with the ring lords. I mean, so when we're talking about the ring lords of the stumbling over my words here, but when they talk about Lord of the Rings, the title and this ring sort of bond and union of these different peoples to bring peace back to the world. This is the Anunnaki Lord of the Rings, ring lords table that ruled the ancient world, and it's also metaphorically represented in King Arthur with the Round Table and the different knights. And of course, you've got the Norse knights in there, like Galahad, or is it Galahad? No, he's more from France. Gawain from Norway, and who's represented in that. So he's mixing in a number of different things, as what a lot of the more modern mythologists do. So Narnia has a lot of sort of mixing of ideas and newer thoughts. So yeah, he kind of goes off on his own, but at the same time, what he's really trying to do is just keep alive the different sort of main sort of narratives from prehistory that he was focusing on, in terms of the different types of peoples and species, and that there was way more going on in the age before the flood, and that even at the end of the flood, he has a great sort of allegory there where you've got all these different beings going away on a ship, on a boat, and that's a metaphor for the flood, and they leave it with, now it's the time of man. So that's why we don't see them. They become hidden, or they go into portals, or they go into the other world, or the nether world, go to Anwin. I mean, this is all the same sort of allegory all the way through. It does just different names for the different places that they go to, because they're vernacular names for the different cultures.
Yeah, and this is something kind of interesting that I wanted to bring up in this show. But have you guys heard of the legend of the Sheep-Eater Indian tribe in Yellowstone? If you guys don't look it up, if you haven't, look it up real quick, because it's I'll talk about it a little bit. But there's a Sheep-Eater Indian tribe. If you look on Yellowstone National Park's actual website, they have it. They talk about it. But there's these race of little people. The race called them pygmies. They lived deep in the mountains, and they were kicked out of the Native American tribe. Didn't like them because they would steal their sheep and eat them. And they were, this is something that they have on here. Whether or not it's true or not, I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. That's something I never heard about. I just happened to look that up, but they call them sheep eaters. That's pretty hilarious. I don't know, but yeah.
Not familiar with that one.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I've heard of David Pollides that did the Missing 411 books. He's actually gone on record in the Hoopa Project books that he's wrote of people that wear basically animal skins that are like wild people and kidnapping people and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions at all, feel free to ask in the chat room, and also, just definitely, because we're right now we're just having fun talking, and we're not really, we don't have a real, structure to the show other than questions and just kind of discussing some of these things, because a lot of this stuff can't be DNA proven that these were fairies or anything like that yet. At this point, maybe some can. I'm not sure that all the cases have not been tested for DNA wise, but it's interesting to say at least that there's whole tribes of these people living in some parts of the world, and still to this day, I think in Africa there are aborigines or of some sort that have these small people, and it's just interesting. And DNA testing for a lot of these things, that they've kind of halted on a lot of DNA testing for certain kinds of things, and I'm not sure exactly why. Have you guys heard about that?
I know that L.A. Marzulli has done the Ramo something scopy or whatever of the Nephilim hair. He took hair from Peru and actually took a normal human hair, he took a human dyed hair, and then he also took an alien abductee hair. And the only two that tracked identical was the abductee hair and the elongated skull hair. And then I was talking to Sarah Brown. She's a cryptozoologist. You might know her. She's on Facebook. Yep. She actually brought it to my attention. She told me that they had done something similar with the Bigfoot hairs and had taken an alien abductee hair, and that they also tracked identical. So that right there lets you know that the whole Bigfoot and the alien thing is pretty much one and the same.
It is, and Sarah is so on top of all of the native legends on this, based on where she lives and things, and she knows so much more about all of these different connections, and is actually, pursuing that. It'd be nice if she was listening in and wanted to jump in and throw in some comments. But yeah, she's very, very knowledgeable on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of research. I'm interested to see the new Watchers by L.A. Marzulli, what he gets into, because I had him on the show not too long ago, and he talked a little bit about it, but he wouldn't tell me some of the things. I tried to pick it out of him even off the air, but he wouldn't tell me. So hopefully he's got some new cool stuff, because the other Watchers series are really cool. And if you guys haven't seen them yet, you can go to UFO TV, I think, here on YouTube, and watch the first all of them up to the newest one, I think, which is kind of cool, because otherwise you have to buy them all. So pretty interesting stuff. But
Hey,
yeah,
Gary, I got a question for you. Have you ever read the book of the Cave of Treasures?
No, I'm not.
Okay, I needed to see about getting you a copy of that book, because it's got some really interesting stuff in there. It actually talks about the Nephilim, and basically talks about them going naked and that they had horrible faces and stuff.
Yeah, I believe that. So, and I have to admit, and I've said it in some of the shows that I've done, that, when I did my research, I was actively not looking at people who was doing the same research that I was doing, because I wanted to come at it from a completely sort of new perspective if I could, and not be influenced by what was written. And so what I was amazed.
I think you succeeded at that, Gary, because I've had you on my show a lot of times, and it's not just because or any other reason besides you connected more dots for me than any author that I've read on this subject ever. Because I mean, your book literally could be a textbook of mythology and Bible history.
Could be. It actually is a textbook. What are you talking about?
Well, you know what I mean. It could be used, and I think that it should probably be used in a lot of universities, because when I studied mythology and stuff like that, they didn't have near the resources, in my opinion. I mean, you did have to do reports on certain aspects of different things, but you've got a wide variety. I was talking to David Carrico, and he's reading your book now, Gary, and he said he's got 80% of the books that you referenced in that thing, but there's another 20% that he didn't have, that he's really sitting down taking the time to read it. Is pretty cool. So
yeah, excellent. And the other thing that I found about, and again, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on the North American aspect of it, because the book was so big, and I kind of wish I had spent a little bit more time and got more of it into the book, because it's so popular now. But one of the consistencies to this whole mystery is that most of the graveyards that my understanding of the little people that have been found or said to have been found, they kind of stick to the sort of the main civilizations, and like the mound civilizations for the most part, right through the Midwest. And I've not heard as much in terms of graves and things that would be out where the Hopi are. But I might be corrected on that, but it just seems to be, it sort of runs right up the middle, and so that whole civilization that sort of connects back to the Aztecs, and which civilization started the Aztecs. And most people think that the Aztec civilization came out of North America and went down. And what's interesting also about that, when we talk about little people, is that, let's say we take the Hopi, and that's why I'm curious if there is any sort of graveyards or archaeology about the Hopis, is they have one of the most, and the Arikara, distinct legends that go back to Atlantis. And what reason why that's important is because in the Atlantean mythology is that you've got these Neroids and all these little people that go along with these wizards and things and their mystical religions, and the giants and the titans of Atlantis. And they actually believe they came from a island in the Atlantic, and they were white, and they were the Snake Clan, which is, really, really sort of connecting dots. And it sort of goes back to what Chad was talking about, how ugly these things were. And I do believe that they looked like their fathers, which were the seraphim angels, and had the face of a viper. Now, when you have that sort of ugly look, that was passed on from sexual copulation and creating a hybrid species between humans and fallen angels, the seraphim angels in this case, the watchers or the Grigori. And then we have all of these sort of ugly little people and a few good-looking ones. It just, I wonder whether or not that was DNA manipulation or that was crossbreeding, and to arrive at that. And I also wonder then at, the laws that were given to the Israelites not to interbreed different species. And that law was given, very close in the center of other notorious crimes of the antediluvian world, like drinking blood and strangling animals for ceremony and worshiping idols. And I don't find these things in my own mind to be coincidences. I think it's a connection, and it's just a matter of adding more information and research around it to give it more context.
Hey Gary, have you read the Book of Giants?
From Enoch?
No, it was actually a complete different book. We only have fragments of it that they found in Cave 1 of Qumran.
Yes.
But one of the things that it actually talks about, it kind of mirrors Enoch, but it goes a little further into depth and in detail, and actually talks about that each one of the angels actually took 200 of each kind of animal, and that they basically used the word miscegenation, which means sexual in nature, and that they created this race called the monsters. So it wasn't just the Nephilim that they created. They also created a whole different race called the monsters, which were all sorts of things you can't even imagine.
Yes. So, and I've got a couple of versions of the Book of Giants, and they're the Gnostic versions. So, I don't think they're not long books, so they're obviously not complete. And you're absolutely bang on that, Chad. And when we look at some of the other things that were created, it's certainly in mythology, whether or not it's Pegasus or centaurs or whatever. I mean, there were so many different animals in prehistory that were created that were crossbreeds and things like that. I mean, even the Minotaur in the labyrinth and part of the whole bull cult. I mean, that was, copulation between a bull and a female to create that, or a god. I can't quite remember that mythology, but I do know that the centaurs were created in a cloud. And so that tells, that to me, that suggests some sort of technology or DNA manipulation.
Yeah, and when you talk about your next book, I can foresee a North American Giants thing going on here. Is that something you're looking into doing? Because you look at all these different things, like we're talking about red-haired giants that stood 12 foot tall, that the early settlers had to fight them off to keep them from coming and stealing. They were cannibals. You've got all these crazy things going down these are from like old articles and old stories of the Indians at that time. But I mean, interesting, over in Nevada and Utah area, just right out there in the desert. And anybody that's ever been out there, there's so many places to hide out there. It's unreal how big and vast this area is possibly be. So
yeah, I've got several books by Sarah Winnemucca, who is actually one of the female Indians of the Paiute Indian tribe that actually dealt with the red-headed giants that were coming and basically stealing their loved ones, kids, animals, and stuff like that. And finally, after the Paiutes had enough of it, they basically bound with all the other Indian tribes that were in the area, and they chased them into that Lovelock Cave and set the mouth of the cave on fire and basically killed them with smoke inhalation.
Yeah, I've heard that was done in several locations. So whether or not it's a retelling of a different story, or it was just what you had to do to destroy these giants. And there's also a lot of research out there suggests that giants, as well as the little people, like to live in caves and in more mountainous regions, preferably. So I think again, there's that commonality that suggests there's a connection there, just as with Bigfoot. I mean, you don't find Bigfoot on the bald prairie, right? So
right.
That I'm aware of, anyways.
Yeah, I'm interested about that subject big time. I'm supposed to interview a guy that wrote a book about I believe it's a Flatwood Monster pretty soon, and I'm just it's interesting to me because like so many times I've probably ridiculed people for believing in Bigfoot. Now I'm getting ready to do a show about it, so I don't know what to make of it, man. This radio stuff's getting to me, so I'm starting to look into stuff like that. But there's a question here in the chat room, and it says the cult of the flying snake / dragon carvings on all the pyramids worldwide. Do these align with the pyramid cultures? That's ask a question to you, Gary, I believe.
Okay, can you repeat the question just so I've got all the
Okay,
details?
he's talking about the cult of the flying snake dragon carvings in all the pyramids. Do those align with the pyramid cultures?
Yes, yes. I mean, the snake and the dragon are in all of these cultures because it's all part of the same religion. I don't care whether or not you go to a pyramid in Central America, or you go to a pyramid in Egypt, or you go to a ziggurat in Sumeria, or you go to a pyramid in Indonesia, that they have all of the same imagery. Some of the snakes look a little bit different, but when we look at, the gods of the Aztecs and of the Quiché Maya and the Olmecs and the Toltecs and all the different tribes there, I mean, we are talking about snake-like gods, right? And with feathers. And so Quetzalcoatl was a flying serpent, just as Osiris was a flying serpent. This is exactly the imagery that they're trying to portray and connecting it with the pyramid. And, again, having pyramids around the world and in so many different locations, all with, sacred geometry, all with things that, done in a style and a manner that we probably can't do today, all aligned with astrological alignments and neat things like that. There's a whole bunch more going on there and a lot more things connected there, and that these civilizations must have communicated in prehistory. And again, I mean, I know that a lot of people like to say that the pyramids in Central America are, were built not that long ago, let's say within the last couple thousand years, except that the people there say they didn't build them, that they inherited it from the gods, just like the Sumerians said, just like at Machu Picchu. So if I'm hoping I answered the question, and I think they were particularly talking about a flying dragon, if I understood that right, John. Was that correct?
Yes, I think so.
Well,
Yeah.
he added a second part to the question. He was asking when you were talking about the snake-like people, so I'm assuming that he's asking about the Nakash and the Seraphine and stuff.
Yes. Oh, okay. Well, yeah. And if you look at a seraphim, it has the face of a snake or a viper, and you put wings on this snake or viper, and you have a dragon, and it's a flying dragon. And again, if you look at the serpent in Eden, you have what our understanding of what that serpent is after Eden, but not before Eden. And so what we do know in Eden, that when it was used because it was a highly intelligent being, the most craftiest of animals, which is just the surface of what Genesis is talking about here with the serpent, they had the feet and the legs hacked off and wasn't able to speak and is not the highly intelligent animal that it was. But there were other kinds of serpents, other ones that just walked. And in the ones that walked, they were, according to the Gnostics and their Gospels, they were as big as a camel. But there were other serpents that has wings. So now you have an animal reptilian type of flying dragon as well. But I truly believe most of the imagery that goes back to China, or it goes back to Central America or Egypt, is talking about the seraphim angels in their seraphic form.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with you on that.
Okay, so Chad, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, as far as the Seraphine, yeah, I'm losing. I lost my train of thought.
I'll add something to it. I mean, my mic was on mute. I was sitting there talking. I'm like, these guys can't hear me, I guess. So I was, the snake worship is obviously, when you look at, first off, for one of the main stories, Gilgamesh, I mean, the Sumerians worshiped the serpent god or goddess named, tell me with the translation, but it's like Ningishzida, is an ancestor of Gilgamesh. So obviously, Gilgamesh was some sort of serpent-like, of God, small g God. So these were ancestors of them. Still maintain the serpent look. It's all around the world. I mean, you go to Africa, you go to Europe, you go to Near East, you go to Greek mythology. I was going to tell you, Gary, I'm having a guy on that wrote a book about the first dragon dynasty of China, and
Yeah.
that might be a show you want to join me on because we're going to be discussing that. It'll be interesting, but it's all around the world, like Gary said. There's definitely almost all of them, and a lot of people tend to think of Zeus and all these different people, but they all had serpentine qualities to them, and even in a lot of the statues that they have serpents with them and on them and stuff like that. I'm at like the statue of I'm horrible with these translations, but Asclepius, is that the way you say it, Gary? At the Pergamon Museum in Berlin, I mean they have these huge serpents like python-like beings that they have on the rod, and just it's all over the place, and that is one of the common denominators. Right, Gary's right on that. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I really can't say anything more than probably Gary said on the whole subject, but I mean, they're Korean, Hindu, Christian. There's Christian mythology, Cambodian mythology, Australian mythology. I mean, you name it, it's there. And you see these mounds, serpent mounds, all over the United States. You see, I don't know why they call them angel mounds in Evansville. I really need to look more into it because we have a Angel Mounds place right here where Native Americans still have like their little stuff going on there. So that might be something too to check out, Gary, while we're here to see if we see anything interesting with it. So
Sure. And the Greek gods, a lot of the imitations of those, and the very, very old ones, they were depicted as serpents. All of the Sumerian gods were depicted as serpents, just as the kings were. And you see these elongated skulls that are, again, typical of that serpentine look in terms of having that sort of long look and those high cheekbones and the slanted eyes and glowing eyes and thin lips. And ever get a chance, look at Akhenaten at a King Tut museum, and that's circa 1250 BC. So he still looks like a serpent, if when I look at him. And then they have that really sort of, everybody thinks it's a stylized woman sort of shape to him, but he's got a very odd shape that's almost trying to depict a serpent. Then you have the cobra that's all over Egyptian imagery. When we talk about the commonality of the serpentine look and the gods that were depicted as serpents, it is again, common thread that goes through prehistory. And another common theme is the seven mountains, the seven sacred mountains of prehistory. And whether it's in the dragon, they have seven sacred mountains, and they believe they were all in China as they interpret it today. But if you link that with the other mythologies, those are the seven cult centers that were around the world. And those were the seven angels that taught the illicit knowledge and were the leaders of those cult centers around the world. So whether or not you had, Atlantis, or you had Sumeria, or you had Mu, or whatever you want to call these ancient cult centers around the world, seven is a common denominator because it comes from those seven leading seraphim angels. And they built these religious centers at these cult centers. And they did the ritual sacrifices, and they had imageries of snakes and dragons and cherubim and everything, all in these cult centers that they had created. So there's no wonder that there's this common prehistory. The thing is we just can't prove a dragon ever existed. But if you can imagine a dragon without wings and any sort of hands or feet, you have a snake.
yeah, and that was part of the curse of the dragon, of the serpent in Eden to crawl on the belly, from then on. So I mean, we have a lot of interesting stuff to say the least. But even the pharaohs, you said they have the thing on their head that gives them that serpent look, and you can see their faces have this kind of just like almost narrowing slant in the serpent eyes, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, obviously, people try to, one of the things in the Book of Enoch that the angels tried to have people do is to beautifying the eyelids, and one of the things is to give it almost like a serpent-like look, and the way women do makeup nowadays almost gives them a serpent-like look, and I think that probably all stems back from back in the ancient times, and there's no doubt about it to me anyway. So.
Yeah, and also in the Book of Giants, I believe it was Malwe was the name of one of the Nephilim who actually, it talks about him actually taking flight, just, leaving the earth and flying across the desert of desolation. So, I mean, that's the thing, I believe some of these creatures had supernatural abilities and were actually able to actually fly around. That's why we get a lot of this plume serpent and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, those seraphim angels actually, they probably did fly around. So as plume serpents, and it's interesting, Chad, you bring up Mahe, and he's believed to be a direct descendant, whether it's the first son of or the next generation of Azazel or Shemiazet, and there's a lot of people.
I think he was actually the son of Azazel. It talks about he was the one that actually was having the dreams. He kept having dreams of these tablets with all the names. They kept being submerged in the water, and whenever they would come up out of the water, there was only 8 names left on there.
Yes, and he was having these horrible dreams about the flood, and I think the one of the 7 angels that I talked about, I think it was Bacariel, that was telling him that there's nothing that they could do to prevent the flood from coming, and these horrible nightmares he was having of the flood. And what's interesting about that, and as connected out of a piece that I quote in the book, Gilgamesh was one of those giants that was being told that the flood was coming, there's nothing they could do, and to prepare for it. And again, the Gnostics call that not just the Book of Giants, that's the first book of Enoch of the Book of Giants. So they attribute that one to Enoch the Evil, I think.
Yeah, and that would line up with the Mesopotamian and the Semites, mythology about that, at the time when Israel was still coming into Canaan and stuff, they had this Ningish Zeta that was an ancestor of Gilgamesh. So in order for him to be an ancestor of Gilgamesh, somehow either they had to make it across the flood or this, this text is pure,
and
myth.
Then I think it's the Babylonian Talmud, if my memory serves me correct, that has Og and Sihon descending back to Shemiyaza through either Hayai or Mawe. I can't remember which one, but again, and which is really interesting because in the Bible it says Og was the last of the Rephaites and Sihon was Og's brother. So was he a surviving giant as well, like what Gilgamesh was?
All right, now that all goes back to the one thing that you pointed out to me one time, the Table of Nations. These beings were not in the Table of Nations that descended from Noah, so it's almost like they had to have made it across in some way, shape, or form.
Or were recreated, yes.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's interesting stuff, and I know that, man, I really hope you do go into a lot of the North American stuff, Gary. If you ever decide to go with another book, I know that the book you put together, I mean, it covers so many things. I mean, well, I can tell you this, like I've studied so many different books about these subjects, and to have a library that big is almost unbearable. Right now, I don't have enough room for all the books that I do have right now, but you put a lot of those, almost all the books that were on my read list together to kind of just form this real connect the dots type textbook, and for people that have not got your book yet, I mean, I know that most of my listeners know exactly who you are. You've been on my show, I don't even know how many times, a lot, probably 10 times maybe. But for those that are listening right now, Gary, tell everybody where they can get your book and tell them the name of your book and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so the name of the book is The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How the Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And so the book is available through most online bookstores, and most people will be familiar with Amazon.com and Amazon around the world. Also available through BarnesandNoble.com, eBay, Books A Million, doesn't really matter. If you just Google it, it's on almost all the different online bookstores. It's also available through Christian bookstores if you want to buy it and support your local Christian bookstore. And if they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it as it's distributed through Send the Light distribution and through Ingram's. And if you want an autographed copy, go to my website, www.genesis6conspiracy.com, and that's Genesis 6 with the number 6, so genesis6conspiracy.com. Go to the Buy Now section and buy from author, and I will autograph it or personalize it in any way that you would want and send it out to you.
Very good. And Chad, I want to thank you for coming on, and I want to remind everybody if you are in anywhere near the Evansville area, we have people that are flying from Florida to come too. So, I mean, even if you're not in the Evansville area, but you want to see Gary in person and actually get to, point some questions towards him, hear him speak. He'll be lecturing at this conference as well. It's in Evansville, Indiana, coming up May 7th and 8th. And this was well worth it because, Gary, this is the first time you've been to the States to do a conference, if I'm correct. And this will be interesting because we're going to have Rob Skiba there too, which Gary and Rob Skiba, their research, a lot of it goes really hand in hand. And we have David Carrico, who's done a lot of research in these areas. And then we also have Vigilant Christians. So we have a wide variety of researchers and in my opinion, the top of the ring in research are going to be at this conference, and you're not going to find another conference like this, as far as I know. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of conferences out there, but I think that we pulled together the cream of the crop. I mean, there's a few people I want to add to the conference if I could one day, but right now we've pulled together some of the best in the business when it comes to this kind of thing. You'll leave with a better understanding of all this stuff, and if you guys want to check it out, go to nauctv.org. Also sign up for our guest list because you can know of new shows that we got coming up. We got a ton of new shows coming up. I mean, you name it, we just about have them. So, but I want to thank you, Chad, too, man. And I didn't get a chance to tell people about you got a website called Truth Seekers. Am I correct?
Yeah, I've got a group called Truth Seekers Research that anybody can hit me up, or you can come to my personal page. And you can also catch me with Justin Fall on the Fourth Watch. I'm part of the Team Remnant Revolution. I work with him and BDK of Omega Frequency, as well as KCAR, as well as Deception Detection. So you can check us out on the Fourth Watch, Remnant Revolution.
Sounds good, man. Well, tell Justin Fall he needs to get a hold of me and get this show together, man. We've been talking about doing it for a long time, so go ahead and put a boot to him and tell him to get with me. So I'm interested in having him on. But I just want to thank you guys. You got Gary. You come on the show so often. You're definitely one of the staples here, and I appreciate you a ton. Chad, you share more of my posts than I think everybody in the whole Facebook community combined. I saw today I had 60 shares on the post. I'm like, man, and I looked through and it's Chad just sharing away, man. You share so much, so much good information too, because I'm always checking out your posts and just stuff that I've never seen. So you really help with my research and all that good stuff. So I appreciate you guys a ton. I appreciate the people that are listening. You guys are the reason we do what we do. We want to get the information out there. Share this with your friends. Share it with your family. Even if they give you a tinfoil hat for your birthday, it's still worth it. We appreciate you guys so much. And just make sure you guys tune in for our next show. I believe tomorrow, and I can't even remember, but we have, let me look it up and real quick because I cannot remember right now. I got so many shows coming up. We got so many different people that
you've got a lot of new shows that you've added to your channel as well with Douglas Hamp and David Carrico.
Yeah, exactly, man. We got so many different ones. And tomorrow, actually, I don't have a show on ICTV. I'm going to be doing an interview with Jerry Blaze from Here to Eternity, I believe is the name of his show on Blog Talk. But I'll be posting a link about it on NowUCTV's Facebook page, so make sure you go to there. And you can keep track of Gary on Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Chad on Truth Seekers, and make sure you just keep track of what's going on, and we'll make sure to try to put as much information as we can out there for you guys, because I know if you guys are anything like me or Gary or Chad, you're hungry for new information, for things that'll lead you closer to on your quest and your journey. So, but anyways, I want to thank you guys. God bless you guys. We love you so much. And until next time, just be praying for your family, be praying for your friends, be praying for your community, because there's spiritual attacks on every one of us. So thank you.